All through life, different creatures have found ways to adapt and dominate the ever-changing world they live in. The bird kingdom was no different. But the experience of one would become a dire lesson for all. All birds have mastered the craft of building nests for themselves and family, yet not out of vocation, but out of necessity. For the seasons of nature usually come with their unique challenges that impact the way of life of these birds tremendously. And among all the seasons, the winter is worse. It deals harshly, and its frozen cold kills birds faster than virus. This is the reason why every bird had to master the craft of building a nest, and that is exactly what they all did. But there was one bird who could not build a nest for itself, no matter how hard it tried. His name is sapsucker, which is pretty much not a name so unique, because most birds also suck from saps. He was at best without a name. That was a name, if you know what I mean. This bird has been unfortunate. His kind were unfortunate birds. They all lost their lives to the gruesome hand of death during previous winters, thereby making sapsucker a loner. The sapsucker was reproached by many during winter, exposing his nothingness while he gasped for survival. But in other seasons, he was a great bird, so adorable and graceful. He had also developed the great trait of making friends, because he hated being alone, and it became his greatest trait for survival. During winter, he begs his friends for accommodation. The challenges were that all birds tend to look only to their well-being. Secondly, no bird made large nests. Therefore, only birds who were truly kind helped to squeeze him into their nests, where they would stay warm until the winter is over. One bird who had honored his friendship religiously has been the falcon. The sages say, only in the time of great distress would one find his true friend. Falcon was indeed a friend who accommodated him during the past 2 winters. This friendship also filled a vacuum of loneliness created by the loss of his kind to the sapsucker. But even life is dynamic. Nothing indeed lasts forever. People change, and it was marriage that changed the falcon. The once secured hope was now lost. Then, to add salt to injury, from the mouth of the parrot, the terrible news began to spew, being the town crier of the birds. Winter is coming. Winter is coming. Pick up your materials now and start building. Winter is coming. Winter is coming. Gather all you got. The announcement got repeated and repeated more than necessary when the parrot met sapsucker, along with other birds sucking saps, and every other bird turned and looked at the sapsucker. It felt a nagging look from the birds, the kind of nagging look that flared up shame, fear, and lack of self-esteem, all at the same time from inside of him. A well of different emotions surged up, and his heart began to beat like a drum. He could almost hear it as the rhythm of his heart changed. For the remaining days before the rains began, he moved from one bird to another, begging for help. He got few loose promises, few assurances here and there, and his hope to stay alive was raised. When the rains came, it was torrential, taking everybody by surprise, getting many totally drenched, and everyone scampered into the safety of their nests. By this time, the sapsucker scampered from one tree to another tree, from nest to nest, scrambling for accommodation, but all doors were closed against him. Even the few promises yielded no better. The responses were all the same. Nest is full, no room anymore. And there was no pity from the rain. It got worse. He was very disappointed, wet, exhausted, and lonely. Few hours from now, he would be dead like all his kind. He clung to the stem of one of the trees where the storm blew him to. He miserably hung there and began to peck his mouth on the stem. This refreshed his muscles from being stiff, because if they become stiff, it would mean his death. But as he continued to peck and a small hole began to form, he continued to peck. He could feel pains from his mouth region, but the instinct to stay alive could not allow him to stop. He was convinced that once he stopped pecking, his muscles would become stiff and his heart would stop pumping blood to the rest of his body and he would die. The rain fell heavily for 7 hours, and what followed was aching cold. No bird dared to open their doors because of the cold. They all stayed indoors for a week until the atmosphere became a bit warm. Then the strongest amongst them began to come out. Then someone asked, "Where is Sapsucker?" Which good Samaritan accommodated him? But there was none. Then someone said, "He probably would have been killed, because no bird can live without accommodation under this harsh atmosphere." Then the tears began to flow from one to another, especially those whom he had been friendly with. Many were full of regrets. They regretted not doing enough to squeeze him into their nests. He was a good friend, a friendly bird, they all confessed. Suddenly, there came a sound from inside the trunk of a tree. At first, the birds thought it was a snake, but as they paid more attention, it did not sound like a snake. They edged a bit closer to see what it was that was making the sound. To the utter surprise of all, it was Sapsucker that emerged from the hole. The birds flew to him and observed that it was far better than a hole. It was a home, far better and more reliable than all the nests they have ever built, which they built every winter. The Sapsucker had created a home that can endure all seasons, all the time. Resounding joy and laughter filled their hearts as they celebrated the survival and creative ability of Sapsucker. They celebrated him for his resilience, and they celebrated him for building what no other bird has ever built. From that day, birds started to call him Woodpecker. This is how the Sapsucker, a largely unknown bird, became known as Woodpecker and became popular among the birds. And for the Woodpecker, what would have been the worst season of his life became his best season, where he discovered himself. They all learned a great lesson, that there is great ability in every bird to do great things. Thank you so much for listening to the story of the Woodpecker. I hope you learned a lesson, and I hope you enjoyed the story. Please make sure to like the video and also subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories. You can also share the content and enjoy with loved ones and family.